Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another video using a limited edition collaboration set for STAMPtember. These sets, like I said, are limited edition. They are not restocked when they sell out. And it always just depends on so many different factors, how quickly a set sells out. So anywho, I will have more info about that in my blog post, which will be linked below the video. For today's collab, it is GinaK Designs, and it is called Snowflake Cascade. This is a great big huge 6x8 stamp set. And to start off with, I have some Arches hot press watercolor paper. And I included the beginning part where I opened the package. I have been hoarding this for so long, it's ridiculous. And I always tell you guys, it's like, use it. Use your stuff, use your papers, especially watercolor paper. Like, even this pricey stuff, you get way better results. Anyway, I chose the hot press because it has a very smooth finish. I generally don't work with hot press watercolor papers very often. However, for this card and what I wanted to do, I knew hot press was the way to go because it's a smooth finish. I'm not going to use my Misty to do the stamping, and I wanted to give everything a chance to get all the detail. So I cut down the piece to about, it's like 4 inches by 9 inches right now, just to give me a little bit of leeway because I'm going to trim it down a little bit. And then I taped it to my hardboard. And this also super important. You always want to tape down your watercolor paper, but especially when you're doing things like this, because it would just curl right up if I didn't have this tape down, because I added all that water at the beginning just to wet the watercolor paper. And then I am doing the most simple form of ombre. I am using one color and I'm just going dark to light, really simple. And I'm using black. The idea popped in my head and I had to go through with it. This would look gorgeous though if you did like purple or blue, green, anything really, like any color you can do this with. So I'm working with my Gansai Tambi watercolors. I haven't pulled these out in forever and I have been meaning to, use them more, etc. So that's what I went with today. And I'm doing layers of this because even that first layer, like when it goes on wet, it looks really dark, especially the black, like it looks black. But then once it dries back, you see how much of that saturation you kind of lose. So I ended up doing, I think, about 3 layers, just really simple, just painting it on. I'm not too worried about any little bits of streaks and that. It doesn't bother me. And again, my camera also, for whatever reason, I swear my camera does it on purpose because it always looks a little weirder. This part though was so unbelievably satisfying. One, it was completely dry. So I made sure it was completely dry. And then I peeled off the tape and there's something about peeling off the tape when you've done like a background with watercolor. And when you have that like really crisp, clean edge, like nothing is seeped under the tape and it's so perfect. I honestly almost wanted to leave it. However, it would have made it larger than the card I was going for. Plus I didn't want the white border, but it did. It just, and there's also just something about this, just the simpleness of this background. Again, if I'd had time, I would have done more colors, because yeah, a blue would look, blue, purple, any of them, any color would look amazing. So after I trimmed it down, now it is the size of my entire card base. Usually I would actually cut it down smaller, so I would actually have the white border from the card base. But the sentiment I'm going to use from the set is quite large as well, so I decided I'm going to go full size. So this is 3.5 by 8.5 inches. And then I'm testing this. Before I stamp anything, I am like being very heavy-handed with my anti-static powder tool. Applying it, brushing off some of the excess, and then pouring my embossing powder over the background just to make sure that I did, in fact, have everything really dry. Nothing's clinging, all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, heavy-handed with the anti-static powder. And then I'm going to stamp. I took all the individual snowflakes from this Snowflake Cascade set, and I'm stamping them onto this background with clear embossing ink. And this is what I meant when I said I'm not using a Misty, because I want to be able to move these around to wherever I want. And I'm going to be doing this more than once. So I'm stamping the snowflakes with that clear embossing ink, and then I'm coating them all with Simon's Detail White embossing powder. Tapping off the excess. I'm going to melt this with my heat tool. It is going to warp a bit, but I'll deal with that later. And then after I did the first layer of snowflakes, I'm going to do the exact same thing, except this time I am going to heat emboss them with gold embossing powder. Because again, if you watch any of my videos over the last I don't even know how long it's been. I have an entire playlist dedicated to the cards I've made using just the black, white, and gold color combo, because there's something about it. And there's something about snowflakes like this. I've done many cards in the past, I think, using this color combo with snowflakes. I can't explain it, but there's just something about like black and white and gold with snowflakes and Christmas cards. It's just, love it. So I heat embossed them with gold. And then I actually pulled out my Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink. With, regardless of the brand, this is one of my favorites. The Simon Says Stamp White Pigment ink is also really great. It doesn't matter what brand you use, though. You will never get like that crisp white. I get asked that a lot. Like, what ink can I use to get that crisp white? You can't. You need the white embossing powder. But I'm using this, like stamping that ink, because I wanted that lighter bit. It just gives it those layers, that layered look. I have to do this after all the heat embossing, because if I had done this ahead of time, all that emboss powder would have stuck to all these images. And then I'm also using my Delicata Golden Glitz, and I needed to re-ink this. I'm actually going to re-ink it in kind of the middle of this video. So it's not as gold on this background, but I was okay with that as well, because again, layers. So I have all my stamping done, my heat embossing, with this whole little background here. And I was going to add gold splatter with just the gold from the Gansai Tambi palette. And decided before I do the splatter, I'm just going to quickly paint the edges of this, because since I had painted the entire background with that black watercolor paint, the edges were exposed. And it's kind of the same idea when I show those reverse sentiment strips in videos where it's black, but then you cut the white cardstock and expose that white edge. It was bugging me. So I quickly just painted that gold watercolor along the edge and then used more of it to add splatter, of course. And then I also pulled out the white watercolor pan from the Gansai Tambi set. And I'm going to swish that up with my now clean watercolor brush and add that splatter as well. You just got it. Like, if you're going to be playing around with watercolor, you just get used to the splatter. How can I not? Anyway, I let that completely dry. And then while I still had all my stamps and my ink pads out, I pulled out one of my Simon Says Stamp black Slimline envelopes. I've said this in videos in the past. If I don't do the envelope when I'm doing the card, I'm not going to decorate the envelope later on. Like when it comes time to mail it, I'm not going to go pull out everything. So I try to make a point of pulling out an envelope or making an envelope, whatever my plan is, while I'm making the card, so everything's all matchy and fun. Plus these black envelopes, of course, they need to be stamped with these snowflakes. It's just perfect. So I'd re-inked this Delicata Golden Glitz. I highly recommend with any sort of like pigment ink like this, if you don't already own the ink pad, when you purchase an ink pad like this, get the refill at the same time. You go through more ink with it. Pigment inks are very, very thick. You use more ink than you would with a dye-based ink pad. So I just recommend it. I have re-inked my Delicata one several times over, I don't even know how many years I've had this, but it really comes in handy. So I re-inked it, stamped the snowflakes onto the envelope, set the envelope aside to dry. And then I pulled out some black cardstock from my stash, and I'm stamping a couple of the sentiments from this Snowflake Cascade set. These sentiments are big. They are almost exactly 3.5 inches wide, so they are big sentiments, which I really like. And that's what made me do the background the full size of my card, because the sentiment is going to stretch right across. So I stamped those onto the black cardstock, and I'm heat embossing them with that same gold embossing powder. And then after I've melted the embossing powder, I'm going to trim both of these sentiments down. So once they're trimmed down, I'm going to use one on the outside of the card and one on the inside of the card. And my card is Simon's heavyweight white cardstock. My standard, I was going to say standard A2, but my standard slimline size, which is 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. So on the inside of the card, I'm stamping those snowflakes with that Delicata Golden Glitz ink. And then I'm going to adhere one of the sentiments to the inside of the card with my kraft tacky glue. And then once I've got that adhered into place, I'm going to adhere the watercolor panel to the outside of the card. And like I said, this will completely cover the entire card base. So I'm going to add kraft tacky glue to this, line this up onto my card front, and then adhere that into place. And then with the sentiment, I'd also cut down just a piece of the same heavyweight white cardstock to slightly wider than that sentiment, just to frame it a little bit, just to make it stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to adhere those together with the kraft hacky glue, and then I'm actually going to back this with Simon's Big Mama foam tape just to give it that little extra bit of dimension. So people have been asking me what scissors I've been using with this. With the Big Mama foam tape or anything sticky, I use my Tim Holtz scissors. There's 3 different sizes. The snips are the littlest ones. I use them almost exclusively with this foam tape. And then there's the regular size Tim Holtz scissors, and then there's the big shears, which I use all the time too. I have all 3 pairs. I have extra pairs. I keep a pair in my garage. I keep a pair in the kitchen. They're just best scissors ever. Anyway, I use those for cutting anything sticky or anything like zip ties, all that kind of stuff. So back to the card. Pop that sentiment on with the foam tape, and of course I'm going to add some bling, some Studio Claudia bling. I've got some gold crystals and some snow crystals, which are the white ones, and then some the iridescent flakes, which I always pull out when I'm doing Christmas cards because they're just meant to be, and they're so pretty. So I put a ton of them on this because that's another reason why I love Slimline cards. It gives me more space to stick more things onto it. So put a bunch of these crystals all over this card just to tie it all together, and adhered them into place with kraft hacky glue, and that finished off this card and envelope. So like I mentioned, this is a limited edition set. Once it's sold out, it is gone. Obviously it is snowflakes. There's other really fabulous elements, and I can't wait to see what the other designers do with this set. But anywho, I will have links below the video to my blog post, a supply list with links, all that stuff. You can check it out below if you're interested. Stay tuned. I will be back with more videos. So many. STAMPtember is amazing. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next one. Bye.